Welcome to Corpstruction. I'm Brandon Parrish from the Tulsa District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Public Affairs Office. I am on location in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I am talking to Brad Clark. Brad is the Geotechnical Branch Chief for the Dam Safety Production Center here in Little Rock, Arkansas. And he actually belongs technically to Southwestern Division as an asset. Brad is sort of in an interesting position because Brad is actually overseeing the Tulsa West Tulsa Levee project as the lead engineer for the project delivery team. Brad, thank you for joining us for Corpstruction today.
Thanks for letting me.
So when we get started, can you give us an overview a little bit about the Tulsa West Tulsa project from your perspective?
Sure. So a little bit about Tulsa West Tulsa. Of course, it's located just on the outside of the west side of Tulsa within the Sand Springs. We have a great sponsor that we're working with, District 12 Drainage District, Todd Kilpatrick and his consultant, Galen Pink, who are responsible for the day-in, day-out operation of the levee itself. This is a levee system that's been constructed within the mid-40s, so definitely has some years under its belt, and in all, it includes some 20 miles of levees, and currently being addressed within the feasibility study are levees A and B, which include a little bit more than 13 miles. How much detail, I guess, do you want to go into this?
Okay. Well, let's just start with A, right? So the majority of the work, is it in one particular area on the levee?
So it includes basically the whole length of levees A and B, roughly that 13.1 miles.
Right.
Yeah, there's at least one thing we're going to be doing over that whole length, being either a filter berm or some version of that to address a seepage concern that lies underneath or within the levee itself. So yes, I mean, from the most upstream side to the most downstream side, we're going to end up doing some kind of alteration to address those seepage concerns.
And we're still in the pre-engineering and design phase.
That's correct.
Of the project. And so can you explain what that phase is for, what you do in the PED, as we call it?
Gotcha. And I'd say right now we're in roughly year one of at least a 5-year process for this project. And so, yeah, PED, pre-construction, engineering, and design, we're going to be looking at what the feasibility study included for their assumptions and rather accelerated timeline that they had to refine and further design the fixes that we need to implement. And again, that's to address those seepage areas or seepage concerns within the foundation of the levee or the levee itself. And so it's going to be bringing together all of these partners outside of just engineering, but those real estate folks, NEPA, cultural resources, and all of those to make sure we address all those concerns as we're working through the design.
We were talking a little bit before about the fast rate at which we were able to get the study, the initial study, completed. Can you go into a little bit on that? And
yeah, I'd certainly be glad to. I believe the feasibility study was kicked off mainly because of a 2016 risk assessment, and then initiated within 2018 and completed and signed back from headquarters in February of 2020. And this is a document that requires not just that risk assessment, but hundreds of pages of background to support how the project has been functioning over the 70 plus years of its existence, how confident we are in those issues that we saw in the past, what might happen in the future, and how can we go about correcting those issues in the most efficient means possible.
So we have two districts that are overseeing the project in a sense, because you're here technically you're a division asset, but you're located here in Little Rock. What is, and you are assigned to the Dam Safety Production Center primarily, but this is sort of one of multiple projects, I take it, that you are on board with or working on?
Correct. Right. And so, like you said, Geotech Branch Chief, and so have a supervised employees here within Little Rock and in Tulsa. We're also advised on numerous different projects that the DSBC is currently responsible for. So yes, I'm devoted 100% to Tulsa West Tulsa, but also advise on those other projects for our younger engineers to make sure that they're getting all the tools they need to address whatever concerns they might have going on for their projects, and basically mentor, fellowship them and guide them in the correct direction. So yeah, Tulsa West Tulsa is one of the many kind of projects that we're working on.
Well, you're a geotechnical engineer. How did you decide that was the route you wanted to take as far as engineering went?
That's a good question. I'd say in the high school, early college days, I'd worked part-time and then full-time during the summer at a small engineering firm conducting laboratory tests, and just start, as silly as it sounds, started to get really intrigued with some of the soil testing. Yeah, I'm going to let my nerd engineer come out here.
No, that's cool. This is what's interesting about engineering is the nerd part.
Right, I think so. But right, I'm a little biased, I guess. But right, seeing the testing going behind that, understanding what that means, how can that influence a project or structure in good ways and bad. And yeah, what might be bad for one can be good for the other. And it really just expanded from there, and just the curiosity of that. And we were talking a little bit earlier about, some of the influencers that I had in my life, Casa Grande, Trozaki, and some of those folks. And it's always been challenging to me, I guess, and that's the rewarding part for me, is always being able to be pushed to the next level to try to figure something out. And I see that a lot, and you say said, well, we have some very skilled and talented people that also help others, strive for being even better, which I really enjoy about part of working here at USACE.
It's kind of interesting because the soil geotechnical aspect, I mean, really it's sort of the foundational in construction, right? I mean, everything starts with sort of getting to the base layer and building on that, and you have to understand how the soil makeup or composition is going to affect the overall project, not just immediately, but maybe potentially 30, 50, 60 years down the line. And now you also oversee, you kind of hinted on that. You're a supervisory geotechnical engineer. So you sort of oversee these younger people. What is that like as far as watching other people go through their career, especially in the earlier stages?
Yeah, I'd have to go back to that rewarding. For me, it's always been trying to give back, and part of public service too. But yeah, it also influences, how I try to reach out and check on people that I supervise, or even not supervising. They might be in a different capacity altogether, and just making sure that they're aware of the tools that are available to them to do their jobs more efficiently or better. And so, yeah, any chance that I get to mentor along with a lot of my other colleagues I know feel the same way is trying to assist, especially our people that we supervise within the DSBC, but also outside. And hopefully that becomes a little bit more of a recruiting tool as well. If other people, catch on that and they want to come and join us, I'm more than glad to consider them.
And as a lead engineer on a project delivery team, the project managers, they tend to lean on that lead engineer for a cross-functional team, essentially, is what you're working with. How is it supervising people who are in various parts of the region, working like people in Tulsa, who are other engineers who are working this project? What kind of challenges does that present for you?
Well, certainly coming out of COVID presented I think a whole new set of challenges, but by and large, very blessed to be part of the DSBC and wonderful group. Where I think we were able to go just like we had been and and being able to pick up the phone, hey, I need X, Y, or Z, get this done, or be able to find somebody else that you can call upon to help you find a solution to a problem. So even though being over here in Little Rock and be separated by the 280 miles or whatnot, I don't think made much difference at the end of the day between COVID and pre-COVID conditions. I think we've been it's been easy to pick up the phone, get in touch with who you needed to be able to get whatever item you needed to get done.
I think I already asked this question about what goes on in the PED phase of the project. Can you give? You said this was a 5-year. We're in the first part of a 5-year, at least 5 years. Is that for the PED alone, or is that the entire project when you say the 5 years?
The entire project, and right, that's just kind of a quick estimated range. It might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less.
Right.
That would be awesome, I'm sure, if it would be on that less side, for some people. But right, hopefully we're in the construction phase, at least for some of our work elements. Tulsa West Tulsa certainly has multifacets and elements that we need to correct. I mentioned that filter berm earlier. We also have an area adjacent to the Superfund site where the filter berm might not be the best solution for that area. And so we're working with EPA, Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, and that Superfund site owner to with the sponsor. Actually, the sponsor is handling that coordination, but we support where we can to be able to come up with a suitable alternative for that area. But we also have the armoring section on the farthest downstream portion of Levee B, where we need to do armoring, and we have some cultural resources concerned with that in that area, and so we're trying to make sure we can do those investigations as early on as possible to alleviate what risk we possibly can down the road.
When you talk about armoring, can you explain for the people that may not understand that what are some of the potential types of armoring that exist on a levee?
Sure. And this would be very similar to what you see at our reservoir, lake embankment kind of project, where you see the large riprap along the upstream face, the pool side of the embankment, to make sure it's protected whenever the reservoir rises or during current pool. And it's very similar in Tulsa West Tulsa in this armoring section. However, it's to provide a limited amount of protection so we can make sure and provide enough time for that protected zone to evacuate in that rising pool flood scenario. So it's not there to, protect it for, the full overtopping event, but just provide enough time to get the 6,300, I believe, people within that protected area are up to that. Hopefully most of them are already gone during that large flood event. But yeah, just those few people out in that, I guess, great flood event and get them to safe ground prior to that overtopping occurring.
And riprap is essentially those are the big. Is it typically granite or quartz or what type? It's a very specific. They have to meet certain standards for that's the stones or rocks that you see on the sides of on construction projects, or even when you're driving down the highway or at a reservoir, right?
That's right.
And those have to meet some pretty specific design, or not design, but some specific characteristics, right?
Absolutely. Because we want all of our projects to be, as low maintenance as possible, low O&M, and especially for this one, where we're working with that sponsor, and he's going to be responsible in the long run for these things. We want these products to be as durable as possible, just like that rock. And so, of course, if it's going to weather very rapidly, then, of course, that he would need to come in there and fix that, yearly or something much sooner than expected. And so, yes, it needs to be a very durable rock like granite. It could be sandstone, some limestones possibly, but right, it has to pass a suite of tests to make sure that it's going to be very competent and be there throughout the weathering to the freeze thaw cycles that we get within this area of the nation.
We talked about being 280 miles away. I think you mentioned, and you're the lead engineer on the project, the pre-engineering and design phase of the project. How often do you have to visit Tulsa as a lead engineer? About how often so far have you had to make the trip out?
I would say at least once a month I'm trying to come over there. It's still a pretty good fit since I was am a supervisor of Tulsa employees as well. And of course I want to see those employees, but also try to meet up with Dawn Rice, the PM for Tulsa West Tulsa, and work through whatever kind of issues we have at the time. Might be updating our schedule, any kind of future path forward or something like that. So I would say on average throughout the year, that once a month. Might be even more though if we have certain meetings, contracts, awards, things of that nature, that I try to get over there and meet with those folks.
And what's been one of the more rewarding aspects of working on Tulsa West Tulsa?
Probably getting to know a lot of those folks in Tulsa better, I would say. Right, like the real estate folks that I didn't really have a lot of communication with previous to Tulsa West Tulsa. Of course, I know my DSPC folks, even if they sit outside of our branch. But the Krista Berna, the Leslie, forgive me.
It's all right.
Dadgummit. Leslie Crippen, David Williams, those kind of
H&H, yeah.
Right, H&H, right, that I wouldn't have normally have talked to, but have been great assets to better understand their technical areas, and just realizing too, hey, if I have that H&H question, I can call on David to help me find an answer to that. So it's been strengthening a lot of those relationships. I would say would probably be one of the most rewarding items that I can think of so far.
It's not unusual in USACE to work on projects that are in other parts of the region or other parts of the country sometimes. But when they came to you and said, "Hey, you're going to be the lead engineer for the Tulsa West Tulsa project for the PID," what were your preconceptions going into that, or did you have any?
I can't think of anything right off the bat. It was just trying to make sure that I got to know it better. What are those, key issues, concerns with the project, making sure you're aware of that. So it's just making sure to dive into the project to understand those things better and make sure that those hurdles are addressed throughout the project as it's coming to, the design construction of whatever work element at that time.
Have you all seen any innovation or specific techniques that have come out of this project so far?
Let's see here. I realized that was one of your questions, and I was trying to think of something. I think there, maybe not necessarily an innovation at this time, but I feel like core-wide in this HTRW and the Superfund site is going to end up being at least certainly a big learning experience for myself, because that's something, right, I'm a geotech engineer. I have had no real experience within that HTRW or, hazardous kind of materials. And, who's the MCX for that? What conditions can USACE be involved in? And that's been very eye-opening for me. For instance, right, I've since found out that USACE cannot, excavate in an area that have these TRW contaminants within it. And so that falls upon the sponsor. But then, how do you coordinate what alternatives could be considered? And there's kind of that gray area within our regulatory or regulations, and making sure that we're staying on the correct bounds. So making sure we're working with our office counsel and others to better understand that. And hopefully there will be some innovation that comes out of that. And instead of doing the filter berm, which might be a little bit more invasive, maybe they can install something and not have to excavate any material at all, by driving some kind of composite sheet pile material. So using something a little bit different that we might see along our lakes or reservoirs and other areas to address this seepage issue or concern, and also solve the HRW kind of concern at the same time. But I'm sure there'll be more along the way.
How does the community that lives and works behind the levee motivate you in terms of doing a good job for the Tulsa West Tulsa Levee project?
Yes, I think absolutely. Earlier, I think I mentioned about being a public service figure. And yeah, at the end of the day, we're trying to mitigate the risk for the people that live behind that levee. And so to me, that's, 95% of what it's about for me. And also a lot of the technical, folks that we're working with to get this project through is to mitigate that risk for them, provide them better flood protection due to these past issues, concerns, and what the feasibility study addressed. Yes, to answer that question, yes, it's definitely about the people within the protected area. I think I mentioned earlier, it's roughly about 6,300 people that live behind Tulsa West Tulsa that either live or work there. Roughly 3,100 structures within that zone, and so I don't think it stops there either. Though it could be those people, and they work elsewhere, possibly, or coming in there, and that affects a lot of the surrounding community as well. So impact could be rather large. But all in all, I feel like, USACE, we're trying to mitigate as much of that risk we possibly can down to that residual risk level, and provide the protections that we, constructed early on in the 1940s for the sponsor, and since turned it over, and hopefully end up in providing them a longer lasting and better performing structures.
I always end my interviews. I didn't put this on the sheet. I always end my interviews like this. What have I not asked you that I should have asked you, or that you would have wanted me to ask you that you could have gone on and on and on about?
So full and open disclosure here. I didn't notice that question until I saw the body of the email. So until about 30 minutes ago, and I was like, that's a really good question. And I do not know, honestly, how I could answer that, except for going back to something I previously said. I feel like I'm very blessed to work with an awesome group of people within USACE, and the partnerships that we have. We have a great sponsor here in District 12, but also other great sponsors, partnerships like our Department of Environmental Quality, EPA, helping us collaborate with the Superfund site owner. But I love being part of this technical organization filled with very smart people, which I think in turn tries to make myself and others even better, to try to push that envelope every day. So I know I'm kind of not really answering your question, but that was the best kind of response I could come up with to that very late noticing of my own fault, though, not yours, certainly. In the day, I just say I'm very grateful to be here and be in this position as well.
Well, Brad, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. This is the first time I've met you face to face. I've heard your voice on the telephone conversations we've had for the Tulsa West Tulsa Levee project, and I've listened to you talk about what's going on and the project along the way during those briefings that we have, like every few weeks, every other week, I think it is. And I'd never gotten to meet you face to face, so it's good to finally sit down and meet you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to show us around the Little Rock District offices, and let us come and say hello to a few people. It's nice to be in one of your sister districts. So thank you again for your time.
Certainly welcome. Yeah, definitely glad to do it, and again, build upon the other great relationships or that we have within USACE. So I appreciate your time just as much.
And hopefully we'll get to see you again next time you're in Tulsa.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for joining us for Corpstruction. Corpstruction is a production of the Tulsa District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Public Affairs Office. This episode of Corpstruction was brought to you by the Dam Safety Production Center at the Little Rock District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.